part of my coping strategy as well. Oh yeah, I forgot to record. Okay, thank you. That's great. Recording. Um, Sometimes, I find that my brain just doesn't turn as well when I'm in a bit of a depressive mood. And remembering to record, I guess, is one of those things. So thank you. So today, so Rosie and I actually met in person last year at the Compassionate Inquiry Conference when I had an impromptu session with Gabor Mate, and Rosie sat right in front of me. But because it was such an overwhelming experience, I basically just didn't remember anybody that I met that day. It was a very emotional experience, and it's actually something I'm going to be sharing tomorrow at the Courage Circle, which some of you are going to be a part of that. So thank you so much for joining that. So today we're going to do a little bit of introductions, talk a bit about strategies and discussion. And because Rosie is a dedicated wife and supports her husband in his mental health journey, Karen supports me and other people in their mental health journey, I thought it's interesting to kind of ask them some questions from a loved one's or a caregiver perspective about coping as well. And then we're going to do Q&A. As always, if you have questions, please pop it into the chat and we will definitely pause our discussions and get to those questions as well. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about the weekly Courage Circle, which is going to start tomorrow at noon. And this is for people who are either living with bipolar disorder or supporting a loved one who lives with bipolar disorder. Okay, so I'm just going to introduce Rosie here and also give Rosie a chance to talk a bit about herself as well. And so this is Rosie, and I know you can see her because she has the beautiful, colorful background. It is not nail polish, which is what I thought they were. And she'll tell you a little bit about what they are. So Rosie is an excited curiosity coach. She lives in Las Vegas with her husband and her 3 nieces. Rosie is also an Aura Soma practitioner, which is actually what those colorful, beautiful things are. And Rosie is born with EDS, which is a connective tissue disorder. So Rosie is very familiar with living with a chronic illness. She also supports her husband who lives with autism, PTSD, and childhood trauma. And earlier we were chatting before you all arrived, is that her husband was actually misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder. And I'll let Rosie share about that too. And one thing that's amazing about Rosie is that, not only does she have varied experiences in hospitality and gaming and coaching and just being like a very empathic, compassionate person, she really has a very special way with words and how she holds space for people. Yesterday, I really wasn't feeling well and I was in bed, and I could have canceled my meeting with Rosie because I was literally just like this, horizontal in bed. And I thought, I feel good. I feel okay to talk to Rosie. And it is that safe and non-judgmental space that she holds for people, which made me feel courageous to turn on video and talk to her. And I even made a video about it afterwards because I just felt like I've never really done this before. Only my close circle of friends would I show up like that, very vulnerable and raw. So, and she just has, like I said, a beautiful way with words, completely transformed the way I looked at who is lucky, and what luck actually means. Because I always thought that I'm so lucky to have my husband, which I am, and I'm so lucky to have a friend like Karen, which I am. But I never really thought that they are lucky to have me. And that was something that Rosie really shared with me, that I want that gift to be given to you all as well. So Rosie is also trained under Dr. Gabor Mate in the Compassionate Inquiry program, like I am. And I'm just so grateful to have met so many amazing people like Rosie. And I see Netta is here too, and she might also share a little bit as well with us if she feels up for it too. So yeah, it's just, that's Rosie. Rosie, you want to talk a little bit about like what I missed, or Soma?
Yeah, you didn't miss anything. And hi, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to be here. And so, yeah, I'll tell you real quick, Arasoma, and I have this one here. It's the woman that invented it. She says it's just old wine in a new bottle. Okay, so all that's in here are essential oils from the earth, herbs from the earth, spring water from earth, and crystals. That's it. That's it. But this is magic for me. And I learned about Arasoma years ago with a spiritual teacher that I have named Yamla Van Zant. And she included it as part of a package when I took training for releasing sexual abuse trauma, I believe was the name. It was a more eloquent name, and she included it as part of it. And there was a whole series of things about Arasoma. It was too much for me to read. I'm like, just tell me how to use it and I'll use it as part of the program. And I used it, and the following day, it just absolutely, I noticed a complete difference in what happened. And so for me personally, what happened real quick was there was a separation between myself and let's just say the energy that was coming right at me. And so it works to strengthen the etheric field, and I won't get into that, but essentially it strengthens your aura. And for me, it's been able to be, even with my EDS and my pain, it holds my pain outside of me, if that makes sense. I can still feel it, but it's just that container. And this color is this bottle actually is heavily used and heavily sought after by my clients. It's the one that holds trauma. And so people use it on their body, and it helps be that, that sort of separation for them. And Arasoma, aura, light, soma means body. And so that's what that is. And that's all the magic behind me. Yeah.
It does look magical. And I will include your contact information in my
Sure.
follow-up email. So if people want to find out more, they can always reach out to you directly, if that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yay. Awesome. Thank you. So a little bit about me. I think for most of you, you've already seen this slide, so I'm not going to go through it in too much detail. Just other than that, I have 23 years of lived experience with bipolar disorder. And it's actually the one thing in my life that I have the most experience with, more than engineering, more than teaching, more than being a wife, more than being a mother. It's actually living with bipolar disorder and all the things that came with that, and all the learning I had to do, and all the amazing people that I get to have in my life because of living with this. So I thought that was really interesting. And I've had 2 hospitalizations. One was just last year, and collectively I've had to go through 4 years of disability leave. And all that is to say, I find a lot of people, they don't know behind the scenes what you're dealing with, because social media, it's all very shiny and pretty, but behind the scenes, there's just a lot of struggle and challenge, and nobody is alone in dealing with this. I don't think anyone goes through life completely unscathed. It doesn't matter how good things look when it's packaged nicely and polished on social media. So I feel like you're in the right place if you care about somebody, or you care about mental health challenges, and you want to learn from our lived experiences. I do want to mention about trigger warning, because today we're, I think every session I should talk about that. Just exercise self-care if what we're talking about is something that is just not sitting well with you. Feel free to take a break, feel free to leave. We will not be offended in the least. We just want you to make sure you take care of yourself. And, please keep an open mind. And if you do have urgent issues that require professional support, because none of us are medical professionals. Well, Karen's a pharmacist, but she's not going to dispense medication. But we're not here to give medical or diagnostic advice. So just make sure that you do seek professional help if you need it. So just kind of to start, I posted this on social media a week ago, just to let people know that we're having this session, but also just to share some of my own coping strategies. And it was so interesting to then talk about this with Rosie and Karen, and realizing that, coping strategies is almost like an iceberg, and sort of above the water are things that you can see that you do, which obviously make a difference, like exercise, eating well, learning about healing, different tools, different resources. Those are all really, really helpful. But there's so much that goes on under the water, if you're talking about this giant iceberg that is what we need to cope with everyday life. And so what I didn't really think about, or what I didn't really talk about in that social media post, is everything that goes under the water. And I think this is where I'm going to actually stop sharing the slides and have this discussion with Rosie and Karen about, is really that last piece about embracing support and being okay to ask for help. Because I always say that, the number one thing that keeps me going, that allows me to do the work that I do, is my husband's support. And it's true. It's so important. Without it, I really wouldn't be the person that I am. I wouldn't be able to be the person that I am or want to be. But there's so much more associated with that as well. So I'm just gonna kind of stop this and just share with you what made me really have to invite Rosie. So Rosie, we were messaging, and I said to her, almost out of like habit, I said, "Oh, she was sharing with me how much she's learning about bipolar disorder, helping with her husband's misdiagnosis and supporting him through autism, PTSD, and childhood trauma." And just out of habit, I said, "Oh, Rosie, your husband is so lucky to have you." And usually it just goes there. When I say that to people, usually it just like, it doesn't really continue the conversation. But Rosie actually came back and said, well, I forget exactly how she worded it, but basically like, why would you think that? Or why would you think that I'm lucky? Because I'm also very lucky to have my husband. So Rosie, do you want to role play this for them? Because I thought this was like a really important distinction about feeling lucky and who's lucky. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the exchange was about last week. You had a co-host on, Irina, from the suicide attention training with compassionate inquiry. And so I was on that call. And I had messaged you saying, just thank you for that. I loved it, enjoyed it very much. My husband suffers from suicide ideations, and I have family members as well. And you sharing your story with it, combined with her, was, it was beautiful. It was so beautiful. And yeah, you came back and said, I said, my husband's, autistic and suffers from this. And the auto response was that, oh, he's so lucky to have you. And I recalled when I read that, just thinking, this is an automatic response. This is, And forgive me if any of this doesn't resonate with you. And if it doesn't, if it's not you, then just tell me it's not you. But I understood it to be an automatic response. I understood it to be that that's something that someone who yourself suffers from this is just is accustomed to saying, and that it was coming from someone who feels likely guilt and shame for having, right, someone, and someone who is absolutely grateful, of course, for having the support that she does. But what struck me was more so the guilt and shame, and and I do get a little emotional. So I get a little emotional because here's a human being, right? It's not that it's you. It's not that we've met before. It's not because you're in the program. Here's a human being that felt she needed to say that, right? And so for me, it was, yeah, just a natural response for me in that. And I think about my husband. I thought about my husband in that instant as well. And he, of course, he's extremely grateful for me, but my God, I am so grateful for him. I'm grateful for him. I'm grateful for just the learning that I have. I am a much more, I mean, I'm already an empath, but my skills have been honed being with him. My compassion through the roof, every bit of me has expanded in ways that I had suppressed, I would say, working in the corporate industry for so long. But I am everything because of him, and he is everything, sure, right, because of me, and then we are everything because of, right, we belong to this collective, and I wholeheartedly, right, believe that. And he gave me the permission, in essence, that I was looking for, I guess, to go back to my childhood. I grew up with 4 brothers, right? So I didn't want to be a little girl. I didn't want color. Oh, I like black, right? And now look at me, like I'm all about the color. It's like he gave me permission to, yes, say, oh, I actually do love people. I love them. I don't hate them. I don't want to be away from people. But it's just, and the vulnerability, and I see that in you, and I saw that in you at the conference, is I don't know that I will ever reach that. And I think I shared this with you in that message. I don't know that I will ever reach that level of negative, right? Beyond 0 and whatever over 100 is. My spectrum has always been like, let's say between, 40 and 60, where I can be super excited. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. And then really effing pissed off, like mother, right? But it doesn't go beyond that. With him and with you that day, with him, I witness the beyond 0, the under the iceberg. I get to witness that. I get to witness that despair, the sadness, and then the rage and the anger, and just the phases, and how the face morphs, and all of that. And for me, that's as a witness, yes, he's going through things, but it's so magical and beautiful. And yes, it's extreme, but people like me get to witness that with folks like you. And yeah, I know you struggle, and there's a part of me that wishes I could take everyone's struggle away, but then there's also a part of me that wants to feel into those sides that you will feel into, that I don't know that I will know, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
I don't know
that
if that answered your question or.
No, it does. If it's okay, I just love to read one excerpt
Yeah.
from your message, which
Mhm.
I think could further give people an insight into what it means to, because I never really understood the meaning of being regulated, because I always find it so hard to be regulated. And Karen and I actually were talking the other day about, if you look at your mood as a sine curve, um, you know, my amplitude is just larger than yours, Karen's, my husband's. Like your amplitude is just smaller. And most of the time you might be able to kind of fluctuate at the 0 line, whereas my fluctuations might be quite a bit bigger. So then you are more regulated in the societal view of things. And I always thought that it was better to be regulated. So then my coping strategy is trying to be regulated, because that's what I thought is what I need it to be. And I think people living with any kind of mental illness are kind of told that as well if they seek medical attention, because your doctor is also trying to regulate you more so that you're more at the 0 line. So this is something that Rosie wrote to me, and I thought, oh my gosh. She said, people like me who are mostly regulated need to witness the other side, the raw, seemingly out of control side of another human being, to gain further empathy, and for me to spread the word. This out of control state is quite in control, and I often say to myself, I have it all wrong. We should feel the full spectrum of emotion daily, as we were born with them.
Yeah.
That was so powerful for me to see. And Karen, do you want to say something? Because I know Karen also really loved what you wrote.
Yeah, I really loved what you wrote. I also really liked, I never thought about it this way about the 40/60. Um, I might be like 45/55. I, I find, um, Yolanda always calls me a robot. And
Yes.
and yeah, I'm a bit robotic who thrives on routine. But I think that I'm also quite empathetic to people who aren't within the 40/60. Um, but I just found your words beautiful, and I think you're absolutely right in what you say, that we need to understand and know about the entire spectrum of the human condition.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, I shared this during one of the previous talks, just about not feeling okay to ask for help. And I know today's kind of coping strategy is so much around being okay to ask for help and support, but the way to do it is really to take away the guilt and the shame that we feel. And that's why it might seem like we're just talking about one coping strategy, but this one coping strategy is a like a deal breaker and a game changer. So when I was first had my first manic episode, I didn't tell any friends of mine about it. I didn't only my parents knew, and of course Brian, my husband. And it was such a shameful thing to me to be in the psychiatric ward, to be there. Nobody would come. I would think nobody would come visit me. I wouldn't dare to ask anyone to come visit me. But this time in July, when I had my second manic episode, I reached out to Karen. I think, it's also that safety that Karen creates for me, just like Rosie did yesterday, and I just knew I can reach out to Karen and she wouldn't judge me. And I've talked about this. Karen knows this, but I don't know why I'm feeling really emotional talking about her. She's like right here. She's like a robot. She doesn't get emotional. Why am I getting emotional? But I just, I felt so grateful. She talked, I think I called her 10 times a day. More probably, because I was so confused, and I thought she was God, and I thought I was God, and I thought she took over the duties so that I didn't have to. But it made a huge difference, because for me to be able to reach out to a friend and not feel judged and not feel shamed, like was so important. And I think it's that concept that you got to take a step out in order to know whether it's in the wrong direction. And if it is in the right direction, how amazing it is and how accepted you can be. So I'm actually curious to ask Karen, like, what was going on for you when I was like
Sure.
calling you like 10 times a day, asking you about being God? Like, what was happening for you?
Um, Yolanda and I usually communicate through texting. And so, if I remember correctly, Yolanda was texting me things that were a little bit out of character for her. And then I reached out to Brian, and I think he told me that you were at the hospital um, waiting for a consultation. And and so I didn't know what that really meant. I've never This was the first time that I had spoken to somebody who was going through an episode, and yeah, Yolanda was calling me 10, 12, 14, 16, I don't know. She called me a
A
lot.
lot.
It was really interesting because it was very formulaic. So after like the second or third call, it was like, okay, she's going to talk about this, then she's going to talk about this, then she's going to talk about this. And the whole time I was thinking, especially in the beginning, because I had no experience with this, I hope I don't say something wrong. Like I was really worried about like like adding to her confusion. I was really worried about hurting her feelings. I was just really worried about saying something that wouldn't help the situation. And so I would be talking to her, and then I would be like on my phone trying to read like how do you talk to somebody? Like how do you say the and so I kept talking. I tried to keep my answers really direct and short and truthful. Um, and I didn't try, because she kept saying like, "Are you God?" And I would say like, "No, do you think do you think that I started COVID?" That was a big theme in the beginning. Like, was I responsible for COVID? And I said, and so I would say no, and she would get into these philosophical conversations about this, and I just tried to stay short and truthful. But at the end of the day, it was still really Yolanda. You know, Yolanda, all she wanted to do was help people fix big situations, and all she really did was care about people. It was just more intense, on a more intense level, with a strong paranoid um like storyline behind it. So she brought up this idea of like being in the hospital and all of the doctors and nurses being actors and it being a sound stage. And and um and so I just told her that that wasn't true and that they were there to help her, and she accepted everything I said, which was really nice. She never actually fought me on it. She's like, "Oh, okay." And then she would move on to the next topic. um and that same conversation happened a lot through the day.
Yeah. And at the time, when I was talking to Karen, she was like a lifeline for me because I felt like I couldn't trust the people in the hospital. So the only person, and I wasn't even sure if Brian was a good person or not at the time. Like it's a very confusing time. And, it could be very difficult, of course, for Karen to support someone through that. But, she didn't give up. She didn't look at me differently. And so and I asked Karen to come and take me out for lunch one day because Brian couldn't. And Karen was the first friend ever to visit me in the hospital between both hospitalizations. And what it did for me afterwards is it really, really reduced a lot of the shame that I felt about my own condition. Just having a friend to accept me as who I am. I kind of felt like, because she's not obligated to, we don't have a kid together, like me and Brian, even though, as you know, that doesn't really hold a lot either sometimes. But like, I just felt like, but she really just cared about me for me. But it was a risk that I took too at the time. Like, she could have been really dismissive or scared, but I think sometimes you have to follow your gut. And Rosie would know this too. It's like the gut feel is so important. Like, I just knew, I was like, I can call Karen. I'm going to call Karen. This is the person I'm going to call, like, sorry, Karen. but I just felt like I could, and she has a really busy life, but I was like, no, I need to talk to her. So I think it's important to just follow that gut feeling as well, and step out of your comfort zone a little bit. And you never know what can result and what you would achieve in terms of new ways for you to cope with a difficult and, nearly impossible situation. So I'm just curious. I know there's a couple of people here that might be having questions or might want to share something about coping strategies. So I'm just going to do a blanket call out to see if anyone wants to share anything after we talked about this a little bit more. And you can type it in the chat. You don't have to come on video. But there is something that I would love to share with you that's specifically about bipolar disorder and about coping strategies in Dr. Gabor Mate's book. So it's a huge book, but it's his most recent book, and I loved it. And there's one part here about bipolar disorder. He actually talked about somebody who lives with bipolar disorder and what her experience has been, and everything that Karen shared with you about what happened to me actually almost word for word happened to her. Just that feeling of paranoia, like feeling powerful but confused. It's a very typical way that manic episodes happen. So on page 269 of his book, he wrote, a study in 2013 looked at nearly 600 French and Norwegian subjects with bipolar diagnosis. The results demonstrate consistent associations between childhood trauma and more severe clinical characteristics in bipolar disorder. So for me, what that meant is when I was little, I was brought up by my grandparents. So I didn't have any control over who I would be with. I was a baby. And then I was reunited with my parents when I was around 4 years old. Also didn't have any control over that. And my parents also, my mom mostly, also used me a lot as a way to share troubles about their marriage, which now I learned is not a good thing. And she also had her own traumas. I think my grandmother also did that, used her as, a little psychiatrist when she was younger. So she didn't know that was wrong. But when this combination of events happen in the child when they were young, what ends up happening is that you don't understand control. Like, you don't understand what you have control over, what you don't have control over. And so that's actually how this bipolar diagnosis happened. It's that you end up living this world where you don't have any control because you were a child. And that can also make you feel like you want control when you're an adult. And that's where a lot of people who have a bipolar diagnosis might experience in their manic episodes, which is the more severe form of bipolar disorder, more severe than the hypomania. And so I thought that was really interesting. So this is not talked about a lot, but a coping strategy is really to get clear on what you have experienced, if you can, as a child. That really can explain a lot of things. And the case study in this book, the woman named Katerina had a very similar experience where her father relied on her as a confidant all of her childhood, and really leaned on her for emotional support. And so when she was in her 20s, that's when she actually ended up having a manic episode where she felt that she was God. And it was because she felt that she had always had to play a very powerful role, even as a child, when she couldn't. And so that really pushed that development into more like supernatural kind of. Yeah. Sorry, Rosie, you were nodding. Did you want to add something to this part?
Yeah, I find it all just very just fascinating in that what you described, your connection with Karen, the knowing. So there's what goes on psychologically, right, in the mind, but you kept going back to your gut. I know I can reach out to her, and I did, and you said trust your gut. So knowing that there is that, so that gut, that sense of self, that even when you were in the hospital, right, in this very manic state, you could still rely, right, on your gut. And yeah, I don't know if you realize that, if that's what you're describing, that there was this separation, but there was something in you still, that self that wasn't affected by the manic, right, episode, and
Yeah.
that knew I can reach out, and you did. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's incredible.
definitely. And I think that it kind of just maybe goes back to the whole concept that your body holds so much wisdom, you know, no matter what is going on with your mind and what's going on chemically or whatever, but your body really still holds that wisdom. And I remember Brian saying, like, stop calling Karen. Like, he already called her like 10 times or something. I don't usually listen to Brian, so it was like not a big deal. But I do remember thinking, but I need to talk to her. Like, I need to verify one more thing. And I remember asking her, I said, Karen, am I supposed to transform public education? And she's like, no, that's way too big for you. Like, don't do that. You know, just like, let's start small. But you know, it turns out that I'm working on something that could possibly, I don't know, but it's just in the time I needed her like way of being. I think I couldn't have listened to anyone else. And I just knew that. So yeah, so it was really special. So I think it's very important to have a Karen in your life, you know, like just kind of know who that person is. I think it's important.
Can I comment one more thing just about
Yeah,
my experience?
yeah,
Whenever you would call, I found that you were really really confused, but by the end of the conversation, somehow we had worked through all of your thoughts, and you were calm enough to feel like good and to hang up. Like, I always felt as though you felt like really like calmed after our conversations, and so that's the reason why was I like, don't feel guilty about calling me. I felt like I did something for you every single time, right? Like, it made me feel good to be able to be there for you.
yeah. Thank you. And I didn't feel guilty in the moment. You know, I not like if I called you 10 times a day now, I would definitely feel bad about that, right? For no reason. But in that moment, I didn't. And I also somehow knew you wouldn't be mad at me for calling you so much. And she just has this godlike way about her. I don't have a manic episode now, but there's still like a little part of me that's like, maybe she could be. I don't know. Anything's possible. So yeah. So I think that's why I say I think everyone needs to have Karen in their lives. Like, you don't even know who that person might be, but you got to try, right? You got to kind of risk and put yourself out there. And just how important this concept of support is. And it just, because it does everything for you. It reduces your shame, your guilt, and it helps with your own self-love, self-compassion, and self-acceptance. Because the moment you can reach out to somebody to help you in your moment of need, that is one of the biggest acts of self-love that you can do for yourself, right? So Netta asked a great question here. She said, I wonder of everyone with bipolar was a parentified child in their childhood. Yeah. I feel like, I mean, this is obviously not based on any research I've done, but I feel like that is so possible. Like, there's just such a big part of that, because just this concept of control, when you are a parentified child, it's just like really, yeah. Sorry, Netta, go ahead.
No, that's cool. Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that's why that's why I'm here, like, to hear from like other people that have the same that have the same sight. And I think being a parentified child, so kind of what you did with Karen was allow yourself to be a child, like to be taken care of. It's like, as children, parentified childs we're never allowed to be, we have to take care of the people that we're supposed to take care of us. And we have to like keep things together and take care of them. And then there's shame around, anything that keeps us from doing that, any feelings that we have, and then when we need support, when we need help. So you being able to go through that process of getting that support, kind of like what you didn't get as a child, I think. Like as a child, if our toddler or whatever comes up to us, 15 times a day, that's totally, and they do, and our child will come, 15, right? They need to be validated for this. They need to be validated for that. They need to, and when they are, then there's no shame around having these feelings. And yeah, I think it's amazing that Karen could do that for you. And I believe that if we can feel our feelings without, having to suppress them, to keep it together, yeah, I think that's what causes the disorder.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think like the suppression of our feelings, the need to keep it together, the need to to be able to be there for others at the expense of being there for ourselves. So I believe that when we get that from the outside and we can then do it for ourselves, I think healing is possible, and I think this has a lot to do with it. I think this would be a major factor in healing.
Definitely.
So thank you.
Yeah, it's so true. I think it's being able to almost show love to the inner child that didn't have that when you needed it. And actually, Karen is an amazing mom, so and wife. So I guess I was just like added on as a fourth child, which is fine. I'm okay with that. But Yeah,
Rhonda, can I share something?
yeah, of course,
Is
Rosie.
it okay? Okay, so just a couple things is when in the indigenous cultures, I'm half indigenous Mexican. In the indigenous cultures, and I know this to be true for all of the indigenous cultures, anyone that has some sort of what we would now describe as a mental, right, condition, a mental illness, those folks are taken in circle, right? And if they're having a manic episode, or if they're, let's say autistic, they didn't have those terms back then, but whatever visions, whatever questions, whatever they were having, they would be held in circle. And someone like me would be writing everything down. I know that's what my role would be, to decipher, okay, what messages are they here to give us? Because they have access to intelligence that we don't. Right. And this might seem, kind of woo-woo right now, but it's the truth. There's access to intelligence that we don't. When Karen described what you were saying and what questions you were asking, right? Yes, you were plugged in, you're plugged into that matrix that, or, that we talk about, that is actually there, right? And wondering, like, what is your role and about, society as a whole. And so someone like me would be that scribe writing down and sort of then after they go through their episode, still hold them and care for them all the time. But they were sought after, like, for their wisdom, again, because they could access things that, right, somebody like, like I could achieve it through meditation, right? I can connect that way through meditation. And so I wanted to share that. And when Karen said, like, the aspect of that you view yourself more as a 45, 55, right? In that window, I've now come to 60, 40, because for 20 something years of my life, I was 48, 52. You always knew what you were going to get. And so I was that person for a lot of people. They would come to me because they always knew. And I was that person also that would say to my friend, Ria, who died? She'd come to work crying, who died? Because in my mind, okay, only if someone died should you be crying hysterically. Well, she hurt her toe or something happened, right? Like, Ria, who died? I say this a long time ago, I couldn't say it without crying and like, oh my God, I actually said that to her, right? But I was still that friend and there for her. I was still that rock, right, for her, and would bring her, right, along with me. But even being careful, right, with that and how we're expressing ourselves, because in a business environment or wherever you might be in, when someone sees that, we're taught, oh, that's a sign of weakness, right? That's a sign. Or I'd be like, okay, no, I don't want her to get in trouble. She's already been written up. Let me try to get her, or, snap her out of whatever she's in, right? To get her out of it. But yeah, that support system, definitely having another person. But again, I just want to remind you that your gut told you to go to her. And that was, yeah, I think the big lesson here. And Anna had mentioned something. Was it Anna or?
Yeah, Kim, I think Kim had something here
Kim.
too. Yeah, Kim said, it's often difficult to reach out for help and support. The nature of the beast, especially depressive episodes, is that you are undeserving of love and don't want to be a burden to others. Like 100%, that's how we would feel. And it's and I wanted to respond to this because I remember so clearly, Kim, last March, we're on March break vacation, and I hit a really bad depressive episode. I couldn't even move out of our hotel room. And I said to Brian, why do you still love me? I'm just like a lump in bed right now. Why do you care? Like, why do you still come back? They were skiing. I'm like, why do you come back to visit me and bring me food? Like, why am I worth, and I don't remember if he had like a insightful answer to me at the time, because he said, no, I love you, why wouldn't I love you? But I knew what I really meant is that I didn't love myself. I didn't think I was worthy of love, not even from myself. And I ended up going to a silent meditation retreat to really explore that. And so I didn't talk for like, 3-4 days. And what I understood is we are all love in any state of being. You are love, and you are the love you give, and you are the love you receive. And it took a long time for me to kind of let that sink in. And I still feel that way. That's why yesterday when I had a meeting with Rosie, I was like, I don't know if I should do this. I actually canceled my CI meeting in the morning because I just can't. Just because I just don't want to show myself in front of other people because I feel unworthy. I'm like, I didn't shower for 4 days, and I'm like, all of those stories come out. But what I realized that I had to do, it's not about being deserving of other people's love. That's important, is that I needed to be deserving of my love. Like, I needed to feel that I am worthy of love. I am worthy of him coming back from the ski slopes to bring me food. Like, why wouldn't I be worthy of that? But I didn't feel that way, at the time. But that's a really great question. And we're definitely going to talk more about this too, in the Courage Circle, because there's just so many concepts that are very specific to people living with bipolar disorder. Because you're like, sometimes you feel amazing, and then sometimes you feel like you're at the bottom of like every, like it's a really just like such a huge shift. But I think for me, I realized so much of it really comes from like within yourself, the misconceptions, and also really a lot of it comes from your childhood. And when people used to say to me that we are unconditional love is your birthright, when people used to say that, I used to like think that's just BS. And I didn't even know why I thought that was BS, but I just thought that was BS, that unconditional love is your birthright, until I realized that I didn't have that. I just didn't have that. So that's why I didn't think anybody would. If I didn't have it, why would anyone have that? Maybe is what I thought. But yeah, sorry, Netta, go ahead.
Oh, thanks. It was really interesting for me when Rosie was talking about, the 40-60, because when I was hospitalized, the last time that I was hospitalized, which was more than 25 years ago, with a manic episode, towards the end of my hospitalization, I was already like allowed to leave the hospital like for the day and only come back to sleep at night. And I was going for a walk on the beach. And at that point I was like, I thought, okay, I'm going to take the medication, and I was planning, I guess maybe I was still a little bit manic. I don't know. 'Cause I was planning to go to India. But I was just like, I'm just going to take the meds and then live my life. And I met a Tai Chi teacher that I had once taken classes with, and I told him what was going on with me, which I think, anyway, I told him what was going on with me. And he incredibly, he said to me, when I told him of my plans, he said, that's a cop-out. He said, yes, society kind of, he said, from 0 to 10, like wants you to experiences. Most people experience from 0 to 10, and society wants you to stay within that 0 to 10 range. And there are some people that have the capacity to get to like, 100 plus 100 minus 100 or 1,000, like have a much bigger range of experiences. And it's really, really hard. It's really, really hard. I mean, our culture isn't interested in what that has, and it's very difficult. He said, but there are practices, ancient whatever practices to help you be able to experience that range, and somehow stay grounded. You know, and he said Tai Chi, yoga, meditation, you know, and we have access to those practices. So just saying, I'm just gonna do whatever I need to stay within the range. Anyway, he said it was a cop out, and I believed him. I kind of felt like, yes, he's right. And I'm not saying that this is like right for everyone, but yeah, subsequently after having this conversation, I, you know, did go to a meditation center, to a practice center, where I stayed for like 6 months, and learned, you know, kind of really learned to developed a practice of meditation, and believe that when I left there, I was no longer bipolar. And I haven't had an episode since without medication. But, you know, I don't want to say that this is, you know, that it's that easy, or that it's easy at all. But I just share that it was interesting to hear that range thing, and yeah, and share the story. So thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. And I love that, you know, there are definitely different things that works and that we can reach out to, and resources and tools that we can use. So just with the interest of time, where I know there's one more question from Sarah, and I don't mind staying a little bit after Sarah to finish answering your question, but I also want to mention that tomorrow we're going to be starting the Courage Circle for people living with bipolar disorder and people who are supporting those living with bipolar disorder, where it's a much smaller group, so we can really get into a lot of the questions and go into a lot of detail and strategies and so on as well. So I'll send that out in the email too. But so if you have to go, please feel free to drop off. I just wanted to touch on Sarah's question because I think it's a really important one, and also because we have Karen here too. So yeah, so Karen, what if I just kept calling you like 12 times a day for like a month? Like, when would it be too much?
I don't know that answer, because it was really only like 3 or 4 days that there was this kind of that you were in the hospital, that you were calling a lot. I think the hardest part of this question is this idea of a person not being able to seek help.
Yeah.
I think the way I would approach it is probably try to find a therapist to help me help that person. And that's the direction I would go to.
Mm,
But that I don't know, because we haven't gone through that yet.
yeah. Yeah. And
I
I
love
think
the
that's,
yet.
I know, yet. So
That's
ominous,
awesome.
Karen. So I from someone who, you know, lives with bipolar disorder, I feel that there is a huge responsibility on the person to seek help. And you cannot depend entirely on someone else, because Karen is not my mom. Like, I can't even depend on my mom that way anymore because I'm an adult now. So how would that make sense to depend on whether it's a partner or a friend or, you know, sibling? I just don't think that is a fair ask. And there is still responsibility on the person living with this to be able to do what they can to help themselves. And that important part is what they can, right? Because for some people that might be very limited. But I think you still would need to see some effort that they want to get better. And that
May I
they,
say something?
yeah, Rosie, sure.
I'm cutting you off.
No, it's okay.
Just being on the other side, and my husband, he doesn't have bipolar. He was diagnosed with it, but it was a misdiagnosis. But he does live with autism, and he has suicide ideations, and he's had childhood trauma, and so the way he processes things isn't necessarily the way in which you know, by and large, society does, and he suffers every single day. And his capacity is different moment by moment. You know, it used to be like, you know, I hear people say, and I asked you about this the other day, like,
Yeah.
is it really day to day? It's the whole day? Because for he and I, we got to an agreement. No, it's moment to moment. That's the way it is. It's moment to moment, right? And how we show up in whatever capacity that we have. And as a caregiver, I know, and to end, like for Sarah as a caregiver, if I do not have proper rest, if I didn't sleep well the night before, or if I am not eating correctly, if I am not properly taking care of myself, then I cannot be support for anybody else. So if I'm improperly taking care of myself, getting very little sleep, not eating right, and then those thoughts, those parts of me that are irritated might not want to be support and might view, right, things as, okay, they're not trying enough, or they're not seeking out their own support. Because I feel like, you know, just hearing you say that, it makes me go back to, well, people are going to really not want to, right? Because they're going to feel like, oh, I have to show a certain capacity to want to heal myself. When for some, they don't even know what that means, right? But they are deserving of someone, every single person. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you've done in your life. I honestly do not. Everyone is deserving of love. Everyone is deserving of someone to listen to them. Absolutely everyone is. And everyone is deserving of the benefit of the doubt. And so, yeah, just, you know, Sarah, to answer, it's just that it's and I think it's called compassion fatigue when they talk about therapists, but Gabor says there is no compassion fatigue. Like, who's ever gotten tired from, right? Like, from being loved. But if you are not caring for yourself and you're having to support somebody else, that's when that comes in. Definitely will kick in.
Yeah, I think it's a really hard balance. And I think that's why this kind of question that Sarah asked comes a lot. Like for me, I've been asked this question over and over again. Like, some would say, why am I so proactive in getting better? And I say, because everybody's different. You know, just because you live with bipolar disorder doesn't mean you're the same person. And I talk a lot about how you can't compare, but it's hard not to. But I do agree with you 100% that everybody deserves to be loved, to be supported, but you can't pour from an empty cup. So when you do pour from an empty cup, that's when it will feel like it's too much. And then it gets harder for everybody, I think.
Yeah.
But then how do you not pour from an empty cup? Like, you know what I mean? There's just like, it definitely goes, there's a lot of challenges with that as well.
Yeah, the pouring from the empty cup, as you know, being NCI is that, and even that window of tolerance, like I had to learn that was my own coping mechanism. My own coping mechanism was, no, I'll be regulated. And I learned how to regulate. I will be within this, right? So my fear is loss of control. Okay, so looking at it on the flip side of that. And so that's why I said to you in that message, what if we have it all wrong? Like, society, we do have it wrong. So now with my husband, I have permission, you know what? And not that he's given me explicit permission. No, I've given myself permission to say, I'm going to play that song that's going to make me cry, and I'm going to cry and I'm going to sing it out loud. And if I want to MF somebody in the day, just a part of me just wants to say it, I'm going to say it. I get back to regular, right? I always go back to regular, but I want to experience as many emotions as I can throughout the day versus, right, staying here, right? Staying here. I want to experience that. And so that's what I've given myself the permission to do, is, right, to stay away from that damn straight line, to live a little, like I would say you do.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I even got a little louder. You see, I got.
You did. Oh my gosh. I feel like Karen, I'm like, Karen, take notes. And next time I see you, you need to be speaking in a different octave altogether.
I still have 2 kids and a not completely neurotypical husband.
Right. Yeah. See, that's why you're experienced. Well, I just want to thank everybody so much for being here. And really, that was what a special conversation and discussion this was. So, and for those of you who are joining me in the Courage Circle, I'm excited to see you tomorrow. And I'll send out more information about that as well. Thank you so much, Rosie and Karen, for being here, thanks so much, Karen, for being in my life. Like, oh my gosh, thanks so much. Really appreciate everybody. And thank you, Neda, for sharing as well. So have a great day and hope to see some of you tomorrow. Okay, bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.